Hey guys, thanks for checking out Synthetic Native, the immersive tech podcast. Today I'm going to be talking to Herman Saksono. Herman Saksono is a PhD candidate at the Northeastern University, Boston, United States. Not the Northeastern University, I think it's just called Northeastern University. But anyway, a lot of Herman's work and research is in human-computer interaction, but more specifically in personal health informatics. His most recent work deals with lower socioeconomic status families and how wearables can encourage them to engage in physical activity. Obviously, this has some very real implications for health, for society at large. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Herman is going to be presenting his work at CHI Conference 2018. If you don't know what CHI Conference is a stellar human-computer interaction conference that happens every year, organized by the ACM, or Association for Computing Machinery. This year it is in Montreal, and I will be there. If you're going to be there, hit me up, let me know. We can hang out, check out some talks together. I'll also be doing a couple of workshops there, not conducting them, but engaging in them, learning some stuff. So I'm really, really excited about it, and I'm going to try and get some more content out that is related to some of the work that's being done there. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment, and I will catch y'all after the podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Synthetic Native podcast. I'm here with special guest Herman Saksono. Did I say your name right?
Yeah.
Somewhat right. I'm sure that I didn't nail it, but Herman Saksono. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your background and what you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. I'm a PhD student in computer science with a focus in human-computer interaction and personal health informatics. I'm originally from Java, Indonesia, and right now I'm developing storytelling app / physical activity promotion app for children and families. And in my research, we design and we develop and evaluate apps for health promotion. So
right. And so a lot of your work is centered around kind of health and technology, and has all of it been a kind of also about access to this stuff, like from a socioeconomic standpoint, or how common is that theme?
No, the access itself is, what we see is that technologies are usually they're becoming more and more accessible. So like in the future, like Fitbit would, or something like Fitbit activity trackers will probably become more widespread, and more people will have access to it. But one thing that we're interested is understanding how technologies were used in low socioeconomic contexts, and whether we should redesign technologies to meet the needs of diverse populations.
So let me just give a little background here, by the way, on how I actually found you, is because I'm attending the CHI conference in Montreal this year, which is a conference held by the ACM, Association for Computing Machinery, and they have this conference which is about human-computer interaction research, and I thought it would be really cool to go. Also, a good excuse to go to Montreal, and so I started searching for trying to see, kind of what people were publishing, because they only recently put up actually a list of everything that was going to be presented. And so I was searching around, and then I think on Facebook, and then I found you. And I think you've already mentioned it, but just to make it a little bit more clear, Your last piece of work, I think, or the one that you're presenting at Chi, in any case, is about this the wearables in the context of low socioeconomic status families, or
Yeah, yeah,
maybe you can explain it a little bit better than me.
yeah. So this year I'm going to present our paper on wearable activity tracking use among families in low socioeconomic status neighborhoods, and um, I learned a lot from this project because I mean, the term that we use over and over again is physical activity self tracking. But by doing all this kind of research in wearables, what I learned was self tracking is also influenced by the people around us, like our families, our friends, and it is also influenced by the larger social, environmental, um, like our neighborhood, our communities, and even like health policies at the municipal level, at the state level, even at the uh, federal level. If you're familiar with the U.S. term.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Talk about it. How does all this intersect with wearables?
Yeah. So like. This is one thing that we're going to talk about in our paper is that um, this active tracker they send you reminders like, oh, you need to walk like 1,000 more steps to meet your goal, you can go outside or something like that. But for families, at least for some families in low socioeconomic status neighborhood, where the crime rates are high, it's not sometimes not easy for them. Like one family, one caregiver said that um, if I go outside to go for a walk to meet my goal, that could be my last walk. So what we learned was like physical activity can be very limited. Like physical activity self tracking can be very limited if you live in neighborhoods where you perceive that neighborhood is not safe.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Like I'm pretty lucky slash blessed, whatever you want to call it, to live in a building where I can literally go to the bottom floor and there's like a small gym. So that's cool. But what you're saying is people are living in maybe dangerous neighborhoods, and they don't feel like they can necessarily go and walk around and get their Fitbit goals in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and by the way, I don't know if you mentioned this, or if you focused on one specific area or how you did this, but did you were you like in the south side of Chicago or looking at data from one specific area like that, or what area was it?
So we conduct our study in Northeast United States, and I don't think I can speak more than that because we have to protect our participants because it's
Okay.
ethics stuff. But yeah, but we work in three neighborhoods, low SCF neighborhood in that area where the crime rate is like 14 to 37 higher than the city's average. Yeah.
Okay.
So
How big is a neighborhood? Is that like a neighborhood in like, because I think about my neighborhood growing up, and I'm thinking like, it could be a couple blocks, it could be like a square mile. Like, what does that mean?
um I have to check the numbers. so
It's no big deal, by the way, if you don't have that information available. I'm just wondering.
yeah, so like one neighborhood, like we're working with families in three neighborhoods. So and one neighborhood is has a population of 36,000 people in 2010.
Oh, okay. So pretty
Yeah.
big areas. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And then how do you gather this data? Where is this data available?
In our lab, we collect qualitative data, as in like interviews. So we work with community organization throughout this neighborhood and collaborate with them, and they help us connect with different families who are interested in our study, and we conducted 3 interviews with every family. So like we conducted 30-minute interview at the beginning of the study, and then 1 month after the study, and then 2 months of the study. So we collected, I don't have the exact number, but like for the second interview, the median was like around 40 minutes for every families, and for the final interview is like 50 minutes for every family. So it's a lot of interview data, and we conducted qualitative analysis to identify the emerging themes. And from this interview, we learned a lot about like the emotional experiences that arise during physical activity self-tracking while wearing like wearable activity trackers.
Did these families already have trackers, or were they given trackers, or how did that work?
So we loaned them the trackers. So I know in some study they work with families or people who already have their own trackers. We're interested in families who has no intention to buy a tracker and see how that work in that setting.
Okay, so almost like for families that don't have one and had no intention to get one, if they were given one, how would they be able to integrate it?
It's interesting. For some family, like they told me that it completely changed their life. They become very um, aware of their physical activity level, and the feeling that they can achieve their goal was such a good experiences for them, and that motivate them to be more active. And for families who miss their goal, like one caregiver told me that she felt guilty. So like we found like this relationship between achieving a goal, and that leads to the feeling of pride, and then for family who miss their goal, that usually lead to the feeling of guilt. And this is kind of obvious, but then we connect that with this theory called attribution theory that explain how when you attribute the outcome of something to yourself, like if it's like good things happen to you and you attribute that to your effort, that could lead to the feeling of pride. And for if you attribute your failure to yourself, that usually lead to the feeling of guilt. So this is something that when you're designing technologies, especially for in the context of health and changing behavior, it's really important to be aware of these feelings. Like how can we avoid the our user to feel guilty when they're using the app? Because if that happen over and over again, then that could lead to something what psychologists describe as learned helplessness, the feeling that there's nothing that you can do because you experience this negative experience over and over again.
Interesting. I don't want to make this about me, but I think I can definitely relate to that. I don't wear a Fitbit or anything like that. I don't wear a wearable of any kind. But I also don't keep track of my workouts in any sort of application or anything like that. But I can definitely relate. You know, being an extremely busy person, and I'm sure you are too. Just how they're and I don't know how this maps onto these families' experiences, but I know for me, I just have so much stuff to do, and oftentimes I don't get everything that I want to get done, and it can be very hard, especially if you're not conscious about it, to avoid attributing that to myself, or blaming myself, like, oh, I didn't get the 4 workouts in this week, I'm lazy, or something like that. So I don't know. I guess I'm just sharing that, and I'm wondering how much of that is ingrained into us, or is just part of society at large.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I don't have like a direct answer to that. But what we suggest in our paper is that when we're designing technologies for self-tracking or social tracking, instead of highlighting that, oh, you missed this or you achieved that, what we can do is that we tell our user that hey, you're making some progress here. That's better than not making progress at all. So that's one strategy, how to communicate the data from wearables to the user in a way that support them uh, to always feel good about themselves.
So it's just an emphasis on positive feedback over negative.
Yeah, and there are many ways to describe positive feedback, and this is what we discuss in the paper: is that we should highlight progress, right, and highlight and celebrate progress rather than just showing it as a binary outcome, like either you lost or you win. Right.
Right. Are you, so I guess you're familiar, or you're, one of your main interests is gamification?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking about, I'm actually thinking kind of about what Blizzard does. Are you familiar with them? The gaming company?
Yeah.
Blizzard?
I'm not too familiar with their work, but I've heard of some of the things that they did.
Yeah, they've done, so they're, one of their most recent games is Overwatch, but they also did World of Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft. These are all very famous games. And one of the things that they did is so there's a genre of game called massively multiplayer online RPG. Are you familiar with this genre?
Yeah.
So back in the day when the genre first emerged in the 90s, it could be a very punishing game. So a game type. So this is basically a genre where you create a character and you go out into this massive world and you maybe fight, monsters or level up or whatever you do, collect items. And initially these games were very, very, they had a lot of negative feedback. One of the things that you would do is you would maybe die like in a battle with a monster, right? And then you would lose all your stuff. It would be like on your body, and you'd have to go like find your body and pick your stuff back up. And it was just a very, very like grueling sort of high stakes sort of experience. And then what Blizzard did is they took that formula of like big, immersive, massive social world, and they removed a lot of the negative feedback from those games and made it all positive. Like you don't lose your stuff anymore when you die. You level up a lot faster. Basically, they put like, the bowling analogy would be they put like the bumpers up for when you bowl. It made it a lot easier. And so and that's actually a trend line that I think has become more and more true over the life of gaming, and that I think we're also seeing reflected in software and non-game software, is just like making everything as positive as possible. Sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent, but it's kind of cool to see how these things relate to like actual like video games.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because in my another paper we use self-determination theory to explain how people get motivated to do certain tasks. And one thing that's really that, so there are two things that could motivate people to do something. The first is the feeling of autonomy. The second is the feeling of competence. And the third is the feeling of social connectedness. And as you said, like if somebody felt that they're becoming more competent at something, that could motivate them to continue doing the task. Or in a game setting, that means that could motivate the gamer to continue using the game. So yeah.
Have you ever looked at research into what motivates people to do well at work environments?
I feel like that's like a completely different field, and I know a little. My mother works in that area of psychology, like how do employees become more motivated. But it's beyond my field, so I don't know if I'm comfortable to.
No, you're okay. I just sometimes we go all over the place here, so just bringing up things that come to mind. So, are there any other pieces of work by you that you feel like exemplify Actually, no. Let's return back to what we were just talking about. Is there anything that you take away from this most recent work that you can summarize?
So yeah, I think I mean my paper does, doesn't give like the full answer to this yet, but
Right.
I think it's really important. Like when you're designing user experience, it's really important to think about that users are not using the software on isolation, but they use software and apps with other people, their friends, their family, their relatives, and in the larger context, they're also influenced by their workplace, the school they go to, their neighbors. So like these three layers of influences, the intrapersonal influence, the interpersonal influences, and the social environmental influences, they all contribute to our experience in using software and apps. So I think that's an interesting direction to explore if you're designing user experiences and user interfaces. So yeah.
So okay, so I want to go a little bit. I want to zoom out just a little bit and talk about how can people kind of apply this type of work, such as what you and your team did, because obviously private industry is a really big, that's who makes. I don't want to just throw quantitative words out there, but I think it's fair to say, private industry makes most software. And how do you feel about the feedback loop between like the kind of work you do and does it get consumed, do you think, enough by people who work in industry? Do you think there's a responsibility for people in industry to look at work like what you do and try to apply it?
Um, I I wouldn't say it, like
These are big. I definitely don't have an assertion that I'm making. I'm genuinely
yeah.
curious.
I mean, I can't remember what was his name. I think it was Ben Snyder. Like, he's like a top researcher in human computer interaction, and um, what he did was he mapped like research in human computer interaction and how that influenced the industry. And sometimes it really takes like 1 or 2 decades from like when the technology was published in a research setting to eventually becoming like a consumer product. So I feel like it does take time, and some research ideas survive and others don't. So and I think it would be very interesting for industry to look into what researchers did, uh, and because that could be like a good inspiration that you can use to enhance your product.
Yeah, don't you feel like it's really good the emphasis that has sort of arisen around kind of design thinking and UX? I feel like has really come. You could make a big argument that it's not being applied correctly everywhere for a variety of reasons. But at least people really do seem to be more concerned, at least at the places that I've worked, about user experience and about the context of the user, and maybe they don't think about it in exactly the same terms as lined out in your paper, because your paper is also about sort of a specific use case for lower SES status families in these neighborhoods. But in general, people are caring more about the users and the context. Have you seen that? Has that been? Do you feel the same way?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Like no, like do you? So UX, right? You're familiar with UX. I feel like has gone through a really big
Mm-hmm.
resurgence recently, and so it's kind of like at least all of the UX designers I know seem to be. I think they would be very, very sympathetic to the work that you do, and they may not be working on a product that like for example, most of the companies that I've worked at, I don't know that our product. I haven't worked on a lot of like consumer products that would be like a Fitbit or a wearable. Most of them would be like business to business employees and things like that, like for people that work at other companies. But anyway, my whole point is just that UX, I think, in the caring about the user and the context of the user, other than just the context around the user, I feel like has become really, really important. And I was wondering if you see that from where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. I guess I wouldn't say concerns, but one thing that I really struggle is when people talk about UX, it's not clear. I feel like it's not clear what is UX, and it sometimes it's just like designing for how to make people like users feel better when using the an app. But I'm always wondering if this is
Right.
based on the designer's intuition, or is it based on user research? And uh, sometimes those like the source of inspiration is not clear, and um, it's I think it's slightly different in the research setting. It's because like we're like when we're evaluating software, we specifically look into how do people feel when they're using a software. So like that's like the exact question that I asked. Like you've been using a Fitbit for 2 months. Like um, how does it feel? How did it feel like? So yeah. So
Yeah.
I think there should be more emphasis. Uh, I mean, what people are designer doing, what the designers doing right now are great, but it might be I think we can explore this field further if we describe how we make decision on one design or another.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think that the I can shed a little bit of light on this. So so for a long time, I think even I don't know because my career isn't that long, but from what I understand, there are a lot of companies that especially like 10 years ago or 10 to 20 years ago that didn't even, bother having a designer for their, their software applications and things like that. So more and more so, the role of design has become more important. But you're right that a lot of companies don't have they feel like they don't have at least the resources to do like actual like ethnography or empirical research on their users. Um, there are companies that do that do research, but because a typical startup, for example, is trying to do so many things at once, oftentimes they end up having to just trust the designer's intuition, or they put a product out for their customer and then something is broken, or it becomes obvious that the customer doesn't like how this is implemented, and so that is the feedback loop. Kind of developing the product is the research, rather than doing like formalized research first and
Right,
drawing
right.
conclusions from that.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? And I think that the luxury you get, I don't know if I want to call it a luxury, but what you get as somebody who just does research is you can focus sort of fully on the research without worrying about kind of developing a product at the same time. At least in this
yeah,
case, I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah, I would say it's a luxury that I could spend years on like just focusing on one aspect of user interface. Um, what was I going to say? So yeah, so maybe this is something that might be of interest of UX designers. So right now we're developing a storytelling app, and um, I don't have I don't have a family yet, so I have no like I don't have a lot of background in family storytelling. So what we did was we analyzed
Right.
YouTube videos of families reading stories together, and we learned so much from doing that. Um, so, uh, so like product designers can do similar thing by using YouTube as like a source for inspiration, how people do things in in non-computing context, and see how we can translate that like those behavior, those interactions in into apps or softwares.
Right. And
Yeah,
that's
yes,
something you're
yeah.
working on
So
right
so
now.
we collected like 50 videos of parents and children reading a storybook together, and we started to identify emerging behaviors that we eventually uh, adopted. Like the interactional style that was emerging, we adopted those into our app.
And what is your app? Does your app just help tell stories to children, or is it what does it do?
It's
Some other type of storytelling?
um yeah, I'm not sure if I can talk more about that because we're still working on the app. But it's the goal of the app is to encourage parents and children talk more about physical activity, because we believe that more discussion on
Okay.
that would help families to acquire a more regular physical activity. And we use storytelling as like a as a as an interaction space to to achieve that communication. So rather than
So, is this with your with is this with your university, or is
this
this
is the same
another
project that
thing?
I'm working on in my university.
Okay, cool. So this actually ties into your
Yeah,
to
yeah.
the paper we just discussed. Okay, cool,
Hmm.
cool. Okay, just clarifying that. So, and you expect the output of this to actually
Yeah,
be
yeah.
an
So
application,
that's what I'm working
like a
on right
piece
now.
of
It's an
software.
Android app, a storytelling, physical activity storytelling app, and much of the design was influenced by the YouTube data. So yeah, so I
Okay.
think it's a good resource, but make sure that you get like a public videos. Um, I don't know how sharing works in on YouTube, but um, you just yeah,
like
yeah, just make sure
stuff
it's
people
stuff
want
that
to
people
be
want to
sharing.
share.
Right, right, right. Are you guys doing a hand analysis of it, or do you use any sort of computer
um,
vision or machine
no,
learning?
we analyze everything by hand, so we label every interaction with like we have a code like a label book. So like if the parent said something, that we label that as something. So
Got you, got you, got you. I want to shift gears just a little bit here and talk about how you feel about. So, I guess you're a PhD student. You've been a PhD
mm-hmm.
student for a couple of years now. What led you to make the decision to go into research or academia instead of, I guess, academia because there are industry researchers. But yeah, what motivated you to do that instead of maybe just going
um
straight into industry? Or do you ever want to? If you, do you not ever want to go into industry? I shouldn't say straight into because that implies that you're going to go into industry eventually,
I mean,
which
I
may not
worked
be true.
um for app development companies before I uh decided to do a PhD in computer science. Yeah, yeah, but
Oh, okay.
I think like when I decided to apply for a PhD, I realized that it's my personality. I think I have a craftsman personality. So like I like to make things, and I like to spend a lot of time to work on things and make sure that it's it's a yeah, yeah. So and
Well,
I feel
well
like
done. Yeah.
the research space is more suitable for that. So so that's how I am right now. But I don't know, like people change. So maybe I will eventually end up in the industry. So but yeah,
Yeah. I really,
Yeah, but I feel like it's just
no, go
that's
ahead.
just
Go
the
ahead.
luxury of research, is that it's just the expectation that you spend a lot of time on things and make sure that you get everything right. Whereas in industry, I imagine it's like you produce more incremental progress, and yeah. So yeah,
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. But the PhDs and sort of the more academic people that I've worked with, what I've really appreciated about them is that they do have the attitude that you're talking about, which is like it's very thorough and wanting to. It's like
yeah,
very
yeah,
complete, I guess you would say. There, there's a concern for completeness, and whereas some of the less academically focused people I've worked with. Maybe they produce very, very quickly, but there's a little bit less concern for getting things like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
formally correct, I guess. So that's cool, and I could see that. That's something that I sometimes daydream about in academia that seems really nice. I have another question for you, which is being from Indonesia. Do you do you have any insights into this is not really a specific question. I'm just kind of like picking your brain here, but do you have any insights into like something that's been interesting to me lately is kind of like in China, for example, they seem to be adopting certain types of technology much faster than us, like electronic payment systems and things like that. Um, is there anything about, I guess, Asia that you think is interesting about how they're adopting
Yeah.
technology? I know this isn't your area of
No,
research,
yeah.
but I'm
I
sure
was
you have
thinking
thoughts
about
on
it
it.
the other day, actually. It's like how would it so like in the US, when you order a Lyft for Uber, you put your address and you press order and your driver will get there. I mean, everything was streamlined. Like in
Yep.
Indonesia, when I was home when I went back to Indonesia in January, everything was like the driver will call you and they ask your like specific location, and then is there any landmark that I should pay attention to, and 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 there's a lot of customization in the process. Even like when you um, so one app that I use here is a food ordering app called Grubhub, and like everything, like the menu is there, and then you press the button, you set the number of items you want to get, you press order, and you get your food exactly the way you order it. But like in Indonesia, like you order it online, and then the driver will call you, and then they ask you like, if they don't have this, do you want something else? So like all this uh, um, how do I describe it? Like it's less streamlined and a
It's just
lot
like
of
less
customization,
streamlined.
a lot of personalization, and apparently still it works.
Mm.
Um, so if somebody's like growing up in Indonesia using all these technologies in Indonesia with a lot of customization and personalization, and they move here to the US, like I imagine the experience would be difficult because there's not a lot of personalization in this technology. So it's something.
Did
Well,
you prefer
I
it? Did
mean,
you like it better?
it was very stressful for me because like I already entered the address, so like why can't just the driver pick me up to that address? But that seemed to be just the expectation that the driver will call you and make sure that you're in that location. Yeah. So yeah,
Right.
it was really annoying for me
Okay.
at
Okay.
start, but then I get used to it. So yeah.
Right. And I guess you were
Yeah, and
in Java.
yeah, but I think that would be a really interesting research space, maybe in machine learning, how we can make people's experiences with technologies more personalized.
More personalized. Yeah. Um, yeah, interesting. So this is a question that I ask everyone, but what do you feel is most exciting about technology going forward? You know, it's 2018 now. A lot of crazy stuff has been happening the past 10 years or so. What is exciting to you about
Um,
technology in the next couple of years? Are you looking
I think
forward
I'm
to
really
anything?
excited how people start to uh, like people start to realize that we have to step back and think about how we use technology. We have to understand how people experience technologies emotionally, and what are the ethical consequences of technologies. And I think these are a very important discussion, and this will be very critical to advance the advancement of technology. So that's one thing that's really exciting for me, actually.
Do you use social media? Do you think social media? Do you think about it as a net good or something to be very very
Um,
suspicious of?
I mean, one thing that motivated me to do research in health was how social media was so instrumental to achieve positive change in many societies back in 29 or 2010. Um, but I feel like so many things changed. So
Right.
um,
You're talking
even
about
in
like the
Indonesia,
Arab
like
Spring or
social
things like
media was
that.
instrumental to many a lot of social change in terms of policies, in terms of national politics. So I mean, back then, yeah, yeah, you can look into
Interesting.
it,
I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting.
um, and right now,
So, was it a moderating force or like
um,
a liberalizing force?
it was a liberating force. Like, I mean, there's a lot of case studies about this. Like, I don't know, I couldn't go into details about it because there are so many of them. Like for example, during the Indonesian election in 2014,
Right.
there were a lot of issues with the tabulation. Like there were inconsistent tabulations, and then I started this website where people can submit uh, tabulation forms that data that looks off, and
Data.
apparently the website gets really popular. Even the National Election Commission asks like the state level commission to look into this website. So those are the time where technologies were feel very promising and very exciting, and I feel like many things has changed since that. And I think one way to feel more exciting about technologies again is if we step back and think about like how we can redesign technologies to make our lives better. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so important for us to figure that out because I think they can. I think they can make our lives amazing. And especially, I guess for me, my answer for exciting technologies would be I think AI is going to be. I don't know when it's coming. I'm a firm believer that AI will eventually, a strong AI will eventually exist, but I don't know. I don't think it's 5 years from now. I think it's further away.
Um,
Do you have any thoughts on
I'm
AI?
not
Are you
scared of
scared
AI. I mean,
of AI?
um, I don't know. I'm not an AI expert, but I feel like um, AI is just a representation of our knowledge and our thinking. Um, so it's not going to. I don't think it's going to make things worse, but it has the potential to amplify the negative sides of us. So that's again that's something that we should spend more time discussing. What are the consequences of this um, AI and algorithm in shaping our interactions with other people?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Herman, that's all I've got. Thanks so much for talking to me. Do you want to tell the people out there how they can find you, and
Um,
do you want them to
yeah, you
follow you
can
on
follow me on
Twitter, or how
Twitter.
can they follow your work?
My username is Herman Saksono, and you can check my website on my Twitter profile account, and it lists all the work that I'm doing right now. And I hope those work can be an inspiration for everyone.
Yeah. And if you are at Kai conference, go check his stuff out. And I will put all the information, all the contact info, Twitter account, etc., in the
Thank you.
show
Thank you
notes for
so much.
today. Herman, thank you so much for being on the show.